Hello and welcome back to the first keynote of the blog about the future of work. Today with us we have Olivier. Olivier oversees the private sector engagement with the World Economic Forum Strategic Intelligence Practice. His background is focused on the intersection between the private and the public sectors. He develops tools and frameworks to help leaders make sense of complexity and shape the future of their organizations. He previously worked with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Today, Olivier will present part of the work of the World Economic Forum, the work they are doing to help people just like you navigate uncertainty by mobilizing expert networks, machine intelligence, and system thinking. So, Olivier, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Walid. Thank you very much to the organizers for having us today. Today, what I like to do is use the next, let's say, 15-20 minutes to show you how at the World Economic Forum we are building on networks, on machine intelligence, and on system thinking to help individuals such as yourself and organizations navigate uncertainty. So given the format that, virtual format and the numbers of people that might be watching this, I will be using an online poll to have you feed into this presentation with your thoughts. So thank you in advance for this. You can see here the details. It will come back when I will need your thoughts later on in the presentation, but just be ready to share some inputs into this conversation. So I'd like to start this with a quote from John Hagel, which some of you might be familiar with, who was trying to make sense of how change takes place in the economy. And what he observes is a pattern. As a pattern is that the edge transforms the core. What this means is that change, disruption usually comes from the edge, comes from external pressure. And we have seen that this can happen rather quickly. Change, disruption, of course, it doesn't have to be something negative, but it will most likely be if we're not prepared or if we don't see it coming in a way. And I think COVID-19 might probably be one of the most serious and best example of that. For most of us, actually, pandemics have been at best at the edge of our work. Not looking at this, very seriously or as part of the core of what we do, and this is in a way understandable. There's only so much we can keep an eye on. There's only so much we can keep track of. But the issue here, I think, is that if you look at the way the world works, and remember what Hegel just said, and also if we look at the way we are trained, wired, or simply of our capabilities and limitations as individuals. It makes us somewhat vulnerable and unprepared to navigate such a world. And I think here is that kind of gap between how the world works and also our capabilities as individuals to make sense of it that we are trying to bridge with the work that I will be introducing today here. But I also wanted to say that there is also a bright side of it. It's not just a gap and limitations and struggle and challenge. And if we look at a quote here, I put up on the screen in the next couple of seconds, Harari was looking as a society at our ability to collaborate in extremely flexible ways and with countless numbers of strangers. And this is what, according to him, enabled us in a way to develop an advantage over other species. So of course, in a way, we have found a very smart ways as a species to kind of overcome that gap or that limitation I was mentioning before. And as an organization, the World Economic Forum, in a way, you could say that we have been in the business of creating opportunities for those flexible collaborations for 50 years. Building networks, building communities of individuals, of organizations across stakeholder group, whether we're looking at business, private sector, public sector, academia, and other groups. And we've done this recurrently for 50 years across stakeholder groups, across different regions of the world, and providing those groups with a platform for discussion, for exchange, for publishing, and also for running projects and initiatives. Either trying to, as a group, make sense of the world or discussing the way forward. So that's really something in a way that as a bit of an introduction and to give you a bit more context for the work I will be sharing in the next couple of minutes. And even when we look at COVID-19, as we said before, for most of us, it wasn't really at the core of what we do and at the core of what we look at. We had, because of these extensive networks and communities that we work with at the World Economic Forum, we actually have had groups of individuals and organizations who have been focusing on this as their core for many years. And just here you see a bit of a glimpse of what they've been doing with us over the next decade, the last decade or so. Global Risk Report since 2007 has many years actually ranked pandemics as one of the most impactful risks that we should be looking at. 2007 following years, we have established in 2010 a group of experts from, again, across private sector, public sector, academia, on a group that was looking at pandemics. And who, like, the key takeaway of their work was to say that we should actually expect another pandemic as severe as the one we've seen in 1918, 1919. And the whole agenda of that group was really to push the world to learn from the most recent experiences with H1N1, for instance. Later on, the launch of CEPI, collaboration between Norway, government of India, Wellcome Trust, the Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, to stimulate and accelerate development of a vaccine and also enable access to those vaccines during outbreaks. Followed by a live simulation exercise with leaders from public and private sector, based on a scenario that actually in hindsight was very similar to COVID-19. And this was just in October last year. And all of this now fitting into a wider effort that we call the COVID Action Platform. So the question here is to say, the strength we have as an organization is that these historical large-scale networks of individuals that are specialized in a way in many different fields and kind of living and breathing those issues on a daily basis. So the question for us was, how can we build on this? How can we aggregate that intelligence, all this work, organize it in a way that enables people to work with it and to make it available to a broad array of people. And our approach here is very simple. So what we've done is, of course, is building on a digital platform capabilities. And what we've done is twofold. First is building on that human intelligence that I just mentioned before, those wide networks of experts and leaders that work on those different issues. And then also enhance this with a layer of what we call machine intelligence, developing an algorithm here that allow us to scan through currently about 250 sources that we have curated, vetted as providing high quality, relevant content on all of the issues that we cover in the platform. This currently brings about 1,000 articles and reports on a daily basis into the platform and allocates this to the relevant areas of work that we have here. All of this feeding into what we call transformation map, which is a dynamic visual framework that basically does two very simple things. The first one is really prioritize what is at the core for all of those issues, and also most importantly, highlight what is of relevance and interest at the edge of those different issues. All of this with this objective to really augment contextual awareness and help people help feed insights into long-term, future-oriented strategic conversations and help those to take place, building on the best kind of relevant knowledge articulated in a way that reflects both the complexity of the world, but also allows people to digest and make sense of it. So I will take the example of COVID-19 to give you an example of some of those capabilities and what you will be able to find in this platform. I want to articulate the next couple of minutes around three different questions, three different things that you could do in the context of projecting, like yourself, being interested in COVID-19 and trying to make sense of it. The first one here is, how do you make sense? Actually, the first question I think is, how do you make sense of the current crisis? What do we look at? What does it mean? The second question, and now I think we're very quickly moving into this as societies, especially in Europe right now, is really trying to understand and figure out, what will the post-COVID world, the post-immediate crisis look like? And the third one, I think, which is also quite core to the DNA of who we are as an organization, is try to also open kind of opportunities for people to think about their role in this. So it's not only about building preparedness and trying to anticipate what happens and what will happen, but also try to think about what do we want as a society, and what can we do in a way to shape this. So the first question here really is about the making sense of the current crisis. And here I will just now shift into the platform itself to give you a bit of a glimpse of what this looks like, and how you could get some of those information in it. So what I do here is just open. I see it takes a little bit of time for you to see it, so I'll just paste myself here. See the platform, how it looks like. And here the first thing you see is this transformation map, that visual framework on COVID-19. So trying to make sense of the current crisis, what you find here is really what are some of the core issues that are really core to COVID-19. So anyone trying to figure out what is happening right now should probably at least consider those issues. And here it could be, from what we do to avoid infection and spread, the whole quest to find a vaccine to deal with the outbreak and with this virus. Also thinking about the role of media and information in the context of a health crisis like this one. Questions around the recovery and response, and also different types of implications, whether we're looking at the impact of the outbreak on trade, the impact on travel, financial market, or the workforce. So really this is the starting point. And for each of those areas, I think the objective here is that you will find a very quickly sort of 360 view on that topic of COVID-19, and short executive summaries really laying out what this is about. If we take the example of workforce and the impact of COVID-19 on workforce, you will also have the possibility to further dig into related content that is brought to you through this machine intelligence layer, as was mentioning before. So some of the latest research and analysis here from some of those 250 content partners that we have vetted, that brings you more depth and granularity about the impact of COVID-19 on workforce. Also some video content also to allow you to dig further there, data sets, events, initiatives, and also some of the key stakeholders who are either experts on those issues or are shaping those issues in a way. So now, another thing I mentioned at the beginning that is quite core to our approach is not only to give you that 360 overview of a specific issue, but also help you think about this in context and in a more systemic way. And here, going back to Hegel, the second point that was important is to say what some of the factors at the edge or the broader development will also be taken into account if we're trying to understand the current crisis. And here, if we look at the workforce impact of COVID, we might be interested in exploring some of those contextual elements that you would see here connected to the visualization. And I could actually dive into the more general trends and developments around workforce and employment. And here I would find, for instance, one aspect that seems of interest to me in this thinking or conversation I'm having about the impact of COVID-19 on workforce would be that this is taking place against the backdrop of the new work model. And basically here what you see is that most of the newly created jobs are temporary, part-time, independent, and that we don't really have good official data to reflect this. So what does this mean in a context like a pandemic, as we've seen the last couple of months? Probably very important to have that backdrop of the new work models in mind, where we're trying to understand the question of COVID-19 and its impact on workforce. Also here, very important, probably bring into the equation in the conversation the question of social protection. So different type of safety nets here, different types of approaches, depending on regions and countries, and how does that impact this question of the implication of COVID-19 on workforce. So that's really, in a nutshell, for this first element I wanted to look at, really get this 360 view quite quickly on the current situation and help you make sense of quite a complex issue in a quite efficient way, building on this aggregation of knowledge and insights from these wide networks we are working with. I wanted to now move to the second question I had, which is about this post-COVID world, and how will this look like in a way. And here, what I wanted to do is to actually ask you the first question with regard to this. So I'll quickly share here on my screen the information about the Slido poll. You might be familiar with this. Very simply, you will see appearing in a couple of seconds here QR code, or you could also just join us by typing slido.com in your browser and then #WEF, and you will directly access the poll here. So the first question I wanted to ask you, when we're trying to think about that post-COVID world, the first question I have is, how do you think it might look like? And here I just put a few options on the table, basically in the continuum between, everything will be back to normal, it will be mostly back to normal, somewhat different, or significantly different. So I would just like you to, you see still the QR code from your phone, you can scan this, directly get to the poll, or you could join through slido.com, #WEF, and let us know how do you think this post-COVID world might look like. So I'll just pause here for a few seconds, let you take this and let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks. So the results are coming in. I'll just keep it open for a few more seconds. Fantastic. Perfect. So I'll let if you're on your way to the poll, I'll let you finish this. We'll still capture that. But what I think is interesting here, and I would say my conclusion, and I've run this several times in different contexts in the last couple of weeks, and I think what's interesting is that actually no one really knows, right? Some of you think it will be significantly different, somewhat different, mostly back to normal, somewhat spread across those three, and still changing, but actually not really clear cut. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we actually don't really know. This is an unfolding story. We're still pretty much in this situation, looking at how things unfold. And basically, if we're trying to think about what comes after the immediate crisis, I think what the proposition I would put on the table is that we cannot really predict it. We need to try to monitor its evolution. And that's kind of the only way we can increase our preparedness to what will come. So I think here, predicting is a bit of a pointless game. No one really knows. This is unprecedented, and we're still quite in the middle of this. So as a next step, I'd like to move into that conversation on those premises and try to get a sense. So for those who are on the poll, please stay there. Try to have you help me prioritize what would be some of the key drivers, some of the key areas that will have the highest impact in shaping that post-COVID world. So again, we don't know how it will look like. The best thing we can do now is try to figure out what are the drivers of that new normal and start monitoring how they will evolve over time. So here what I've done is that I have compiled 10 different dimensions that have been shared with us again and prioritized by different groups of individuals with whom we had similar conversations the last couple of weeks. And here put some of the top 10 of those issues. I'd like for you to take a moment to go through that and let us know which one, pick 1, 2, or 3 that you think will be most critical in shaping the post-COVID world. So, the ability for us to trust the media and online content, and the ability to assign accountability for its accuracy. Is it something, we don't really know in what direction it will go? Is it something that will you would prioritize as key for the future and helping us find out how the post-COVID world would look like? This question around work models, the extent to which organization will actually shift and successfully achieve digital transformation, new patterns of consumption, the question around travel, security, and mobility, about the global value chains and their potential restructuring, economic shifts, trust in government and institutions, the right balance between taxes and spending, and how we preserve social protections, and also technologies for COVID-19, and the potential and the type of rules and shared rules that we will establish around things like contact tracing and other potentially invasive digital tools. Good. So I'll just take here notes of what you have prioritized on the spot and show you the type of things that we think you could do also with this shared resource we've put together. So we have digital transformation of organization, restructuring of global value chains, trust and accountability, and let's see, patterns of consumption and travel security. So I'll just prioritize this. This is probably worth a longer conversation. It's a bit of a, just an example here I want to make. So patterns, consumption, and travel and security. So I will thank you for this. I'll stop the poll for now. It's good we had a bunch of responses. Thank you for that. What I want to do now is shift and go back to the platform and show you how we are also through that approach helping people monitor fluid and evolving situations and make sense of what could happen. So what I've done here is a little bit of preparatory work. So you can see here on your screen, I've already built from a blank canvas the best virtual summit post-COVID world, where I brought all of those 10 different issues. And here I will just remove those that you have not prioritized for now. It's a dynamic. This is something you can really build in all of the different dimensions we have in the system. And here, this, and good. So I think here I have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different aspects that you have prioritized. And this is something I can very quickly here save and in a way make part of my personal library. So this is now fully embedded into the wider ecosystem. And here, something you can now monitor. It will allow you still to identify the links with the broader context and what's happening at the edge, and also give you the latest research and analysis on those different topics. So I think that's, again, how we wanted to also show how we are mobilizing those tools to help people figure out very fluid and uncertain futures, and trying to build some degrees of preparedness by identifying what could be some of the drivers there of that future, and then basically monitor their evolution. I'll move back to this, the third question I had, and here we'll go quite quickly through it, mindful of the time. As I said, we just don't want to help people prepare for what's coming, but we're also interested in putting them into the driving seat and trying to take ownership of that. And I think a key question we are asking ourselves at the forum, and we are starting a new initiative around that, is really around what can we do and how do we want that post-COVID world to look like in a way. So I think here, basically the COVID-19 lockdown is now gradually easing, but anxiety about the world's social and economic prospect is only intensifying in a way. And the damage, it's very clear, has been very serious, both in terms of lives taken and livelihood lost. But we also see that there is some sort of windows of opportunity for us, and for us as a society, to rethink the whole model and reset, how our society works, economy works, and institutions. And here, basically, I think the two takeaways is that the crisis, in a way, have magnified most of the dysfunctionality of our current model, making inequalities more salient, illustrating also what can happen when healthcare systems or social safety nets are neglected. And the crisis also has opened up a new field of possibilities in a way. I think it's fair to say that for most of us, we thought we would never see or live what we lived and saw in the last few months. And I think this is really that opportunity now where we have seen what is wrong. We also have seen that a lot of new possibilities are open. And the question of build on that momentum and take that opportunity to think and contribute to what this new world could look like, and not just be passive about it and think about how we prepare for whatever comes. So here, the only message is that also in terms of the platform, we've also built on that collective intelligence here and brought in a few priorities that are being shared with us by these extensive networks so that it could become, in a way, a bit of a framework, if you're interested in that question, for you to think about that. From how we are harnessing some of the emerging technologies and the type of governance we want to put around that in this new world, from the form and shape of the economic recovery, rethinking and redesigning social contracts? How do we think about new business models in this post-COVID world, etc.? So here is basically what I wanted to share with you today. Really, those three questions, really, from showing you how we are mobilizing those networks, amplifying this with machine intelligence, and putting it, looking at this through the lens of system thinking, and how in a case like COVID-19, this could be a resource for you to help you decode and make sense what's happening right now, monitor and prepare for the future, and also shape and influence in a way the world to come. And as a last note, I wanted to say that here, it was all kind of structured around COVID-19. All of this we are actually doing for more than 250 areas. So you will find in the system similar approach, you know, including 150 countries and regions, 80 global issues, and 20 industries. And here, just to close, I want to share here kind of the basic information for you to access that resource in case this is of interest. You know, as per the mission of our organization, the content and the knowledge is public. So that's something that you can all access through just signing up to the platform and then getting lost into that web and ecosystem of issues, and hopefully use this to inform some of your conversation and help you figure out some of that uncertainty and complexity that surrounds you, depending on whichever issue you're looking or working on. So I think I'll just pause here. I'm a bit over time, but thank you very much for your attention. I hope that that was useful, and I hope you will find interesting information in that platform.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I am one of the people who are registered to the intelligence platform website, and I definitely follow it, and I encourage everyone to follow it for, you know, how insights, strategic insight it gives. We have a lot of questions, but we don't have time for all of them, so I will pick just a couple of them. You mentioned in your presentation that you want to help people take ownership of the future and be part of the Great Reset, which is something that we are trying to do with this summit with young people. So what do you think are some of the strategic conversations that young people should be having right now or should have in the near future?
Yeah, I think first I would start with the fact that the young people, it sounds a bit cliche, but I think it's nevertheless the reality and quite important, is that the young generation are those that will be, you know, the adults and kind of living whatever we do now in the next 10 or 20 years. So I think it's actually very important that we include them in those conversations that they are actively shaping this. I think there's many, and also if I think about what we do as an organization, really I think first, you know, we take this very seriously, and we have actually wide networks of young people. We call them the global shapers, so people with less than 30 years old organized in different hubs all across the world, really to bring them into those conversations. In terms of what is important, we are actually covering a lot of different ground. I think I would actually answer kind of looking at what I was just sharing about that Great Reset. I think this crisis has been unprecedented. We might just be at the beginning of it. It's been showing us both what doesn't work and also show us that something we would have never expected can happen. And I think here some of the key issues that we see is everything around social contract, work, social protection, how people contribute and are supported in the society. And then another one that I think is cutting through is the climate and environmental impact of whatever we do as a society. So I think for me, those two things are quite high on the agenda. And then you would see, if you refer back to what I was closing with, there's also the whole question for me that is really important. And I think the young generation are quite key there because they are probably the most tech savvy in that sense. Is really figuring out how do we want to leverage all of those emerging technologies. And I think most of these are open conversations, and we can see the type of impact they have on society. So I would say this is kind of the third one where I would say is one of the priorities really, and everything is to be made there because there's so much that is still unclear and undecided. So really kind of design and develop the governance and the regulation around those technologies and make sure we build that in a way that you know, have those technologies create the world that we want to be in the future. So I think that's the three areas I would point out.
Absolutely. In Best, we are believers of the role of young people in shaping their own future, and we hope that your presentation today helped give some insights to the young people on where they can start and what conversation they can have. Thank you very much, Olivier. I wish we had more time to tackle more questions. Definitely, I urge everyone to check the intelligence.weforum.com website. Right now, we are having next a presentation from Hanno Brumer, the Global Head of Production and Technology at Covestro. He will be sharing with us how does it look like during the pandemic and beyond at Covestro. So stay tuned and see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.